There exists a land that modern humans have almost forgotten. Not Egypt, not Greece, but another place where every beginning seems to have been recorded using strange symbols pressed into clay tablets. Here, the wheel was born. Time was divided. Gods, with human bodies and animal heads, descended from the sky, and then everything vanished. No one knows why. No one knows how. All that remains are cities buried beneath the sands, and thousands of clay tablets telling the story you are about to hear. Today, you and I will journey back in time to the civilization of Sumer, the mysterious cradle of humanity. If you are standing in a parched land where the ground cracks beneath the scorching heat of the sun, where life seems impossible, then you may be at the very place where everything began. This is Mesopotamia, the ancient Greek name for the land between the two mighty rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And right there, something miraculous happened. Humanity didn't just survive, they built a civilization. The very first civilization on Earth ever recorded by history, Sumer. No one truly knows where the Sumerians came from. They left behind no maps, no written origin story like later civilizations. What we have are scattered records inscribed on sturdy clay tablets, speaking of city-states, gods, wars, and harvests. Some scholars believe the Sumerians were native to the lower Mesopotamian region. Others think they were migrants from the Iranian plateau, or even farther east. But wherever they came from, around 4000 BCE, the Sumerians settled in what is now southern Iraq and began to do something no one else had done before: build cities, not just villages, not primitive settlements, but actual urban centers with walls, streets, granaries, temples, and administrative hubs. Their first city, and humanity's first true city, was called Uruk. It wasn't a myth. The remains of Uruk have been excavated and verified. By around 3500 BCE, it could house up to 50,000 people, an astonishing number for that era. Uruk was surrounded by a nearly 10-kilometer-long wall, protecting its inhabitants from wild beasts and nomadic tribes. At its heart stood a towering temple called a ziggurat, a massive stepped structure made of baked bricks. Unlike the conical Egyptian pyramids, ziggurats were layered rectangular blocks, forming artificial mountains. At the top of Uruk's ziggurat was a temple dedicated to Anu, the supreme sky god. But what's fascinating is that according to some tablets found there, the priests didn't just pray. They observed the sky, recorded the movement of stars and planets, as if this was the world's first astronomical observatory. From Uruk, the city models spread across Mesopotamia. Other city-states emerged: Eridu, Lagash, Nippur, Ur. Each had its patron deity, its own laws, and often waged war against one another. Yet they shared a common language, a unified writing system, and a shared worldview, where gods ruled the fate of men. And to survive in this harsh land, the Sumerians launched a silent revolution. They tamed the rivers. You must understand that the land between the Tigris and Euphrates wasn't like the Nile, with its predictable flood cycles. In Mesopotamia, the rivers could suddenly rise, destroy crops, and wash away villages. To endure, the Sumerians constructed a complex irrigation system: canals, reservoirs, dams, and branching aqueducts. They measured land gradients, estimated water flow, and even invented primitive measuring tools. The clay tablets recorded in detail the water distribution for each plot, each season, even each family. Without this system, the Sumerian civilization would have vanished before it began. But Sumer didn't just survive, they went further than anyone before them. Around 3200 BCE, they invented something that changed everything: writing. The first writing system in human history wasn't the Latin alphabet nor Egyptian hieroglyphs. It was cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script of the Sumerians. It was created by pressing a stylus into wet clay, forming shapes that resembled arrowheads. At first, cuneiform was used for accounting, to track livestock, grain storage, trade goods, debts, and taxes. But over time, the Sumerians began writing more: laws, myths, poetry, astronomy, medicine. One of their greatest works, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is considered the world's oldest epic. It tells the story of the king of Uruk, Gilgamesh, who seeks the secret of immortality after the death of his closest friend. Along his journey, he meets gods, monsters, and ultimately, a bitter truth: no one can escape death. Questions about life, death, and the meaning of existence, the Sumerians were already asking them 5,000 years ago. Alongside writing, the Sumerians also gifted the world tools and ideas that remain with us to this day. The wheel, the fundamental invention behind all mechanical civilizations, was created in Sumer. They developed a base 60 numbering system, which is why we have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. They divided the circle into 360 degrees. They recorded the cycles of the moon, the planet Venus, and predicted solar eclipses. The Sumerian world was a vibrant one, where noble children studied in schools called eduba, where laws were made to protect the weak, where music echoed in temple rituals. They had musical instruments, medicine, art, and even advanced architecture, with roofed houses, private rooms, and primitive drainage systems. And yet, despite its brilliance, the Sumerian civilization began to decline just a few centuries after its golden age. Why? No one knows for sure. Some theories suggest that excessive irrigation led to soil salinization. Others blame constant warfare between city-states, which weakened the entire political structure. Eventually, around 2000 BCE, a northern people, the Amorites, swept down and seized the Sumerian cities, absorbing them into a new kingdom, Babylon. The Sumerians vanished. No one called them by name anymore. Their language was gradually replaced. Cuneiform was forgotten, and thousands of years later, the clay tablets they left behind lay silently beneath the dust of time, waiting for the modern world to uncover them. No civilization can truly endure on architecture and brute force alone. What made Sumer immortal wasn't baked bricks or the wheel. It was the profound spiritual world beneath it all, where gods, symbols, sounds, rituals, and belief merged into an irreplaceable identity. The Sumerians were the first not only to build cities, but also to worship, to compose, to embellish life, and to dream of immortality within the bounds of mortality. Their world was shaped by gods, more than any culture had ever recorded. Each Sumerian city-state had its own patron deity, not confined to temples, but present in every aspect of life: agriculture, war, love, illness. In the Sumerian mind, gods were not abstract concepts, but tangible beings with forms, personalities, and roles. There was Anu, god of the sky; Enlil, god of wind and authority; Enki, god of subterranean waters; wisdom and creation; Ninhursag, the earth mother goddess; and Inanna, goddess of love and war, both seductive and ruthless, willing to kill for supreme power. The Sumerian religion had no fixed doctrine or holy book, but it did have countless rituals, offerings, and myths to maintain the bond between humans and the divine. They believed the gods were not distant, but lived among people, capable of anger, hunger, or contentment if properly worshipped. In the towering ziggurat temples, priests were the only ones who could speak with the gods. These priests weren't just ritual leaders, They were astronomers, historians, even physicians, serving as the only bridge between the mortal and the divine. At dawn, the priests would wear long white robes, cleanse their hands and feet with holy water, and ascend the high steps of the ziggurat to offer gifts: barley beer, baked goods, incense, or lambs. As the sun rose, they began ceremonies to pray for a fruitful harvest, invoking the protection of Enlil to bring rain to the fields. At night, they studied the skies, charting the paths of stars to foresee the future. The disappearance of a star could signal misfortune for a king. An unusually bright constellation might warn of impending war. This wasn't mere superstition. It was early science, humanity's first attempt to understand the world before the laws of physics were born. In Sumerian mythology, there's something particularly strange. Many gods were described with non-human forms: bird heads, bull bodies, large glowing eyes, or riding fiery boats from the heavens. Some texts even mention gods coming from Abzu, the deep waters beneath the earth, or An, the highest realm of the skies. These descriptions have fueled modern theories suggesting that the Sumerians might have encountered extraterrestrial beings or recorded things far beyond human understanding at the time. But to the Sumerians themselves, these gods were an integral part of reality, and every action in life was meant to honor them. Beyond religion, the Sumerians also developed a unique system of symbols and art that reflected a deep insight into human nature and the cosmos. From the artifacts unearthed in Ur and Uruk, archaeologists have found countless intricately carved cylinder seals, each telling a small story when rolled across wet clay: a hunter in motion, a deity on a throne, a festive banquet, or peaceful farming scenes. These images were more than decoration. They were ways to preserve slices of life, much like we use photography or video today. Sumerian art did not aim to show off technique, but to convey emotion and belief. Statues of gods had wide, eternal eyes watching over humanity. Bas-reliefs depicted battles, rituals, or the transition to the afterlife. They used color, created depth, and knew how to tell stories with still images. Small statues of bronze, gold, and even turquoise revealed exquisite craftsmanship and aesthetic sensibility that rivaled any ancient culture. Music also played a major role in Sumerian life. Though no musical scores survive, carvings show they used various instruments: harps, flutes, drums, and bells. Music was present in rituals, weddings, funerals, and royal banquets. The Sumerians believed that sound connected human souls to the divine, and each instrument held spiritual significance. A golden harp unearthed in the city of Ur reflects both masterful craftsmanship and the reverence they held for music. However, what brings us closest to the Sumerians isn't their temples or myths. It's the everyday records, where deeply human stories emerge. A wife sending a letter to her husband on a long trading journey, a farmer complaining about salt-damaged soil, a student grumbling that his teacher made him copy too many cuneiform characters. These fragments make an ancient civilization suddenly feel incredibly familiar. Beneath the cold, hardened clay, they too loved, suffered, strove, and despaired, just like any of us. Socially, Sumer was a complex system built on order and law. They had courts, trade contracts, taxes, and population records. A citizen could sue another over land disputes, unpaid debts, or marital violations. Some clay tablets even record divorces and property divisions, showing a shockingly advanced legal perspective for their time. Society was clearly stratified: nobility, merchants, farmers, slaves. But upward mobility was possible, especially through education or religious service. Education was considered a privilege, but not solely for the nobility. The Aduba, ancient schools, taught students to write cuneiform, perform calculations, read myths, and learn moral conduct. Students repeated exercises over and over, their handwriting gradually becoming neater, a sign that Sumer was not only the birthplace of writing, but also the foundation of enduring educational values. Finally, death, the inevitable, was met by the Sumerians with both fear and ceaseless curiosity. They believed that after death, the soul descended into a shadowy realm called Kur, a land without light, without joy, filled only with dust and wandering spirits. Unlike the Egyptians, who believed in rebirth, the Sumerians saw death as a one-way journey, and so they strove to leave their mark on the earth, through writing, through monuments, through rituals and stories passed down through generations. That was the only way to be remembered, the only way not to be swept away by time. A civilization only truly dies when people stop telling its story. But for the Sumerians, that has never happened. Each clay tablet, each tale, each eternal gaze from a statue that stares across millennia, they all still whisper to us of a world that once was, that once thrived, that once dreamed, feared, and believed in something greater than itself. No civilization lasts forever, no matter how miraculous its beginning. The Sumerians, with all they created, the first writing, the first cities, the first wheel, the first rituals, the first laws, eventually had to face what every civilization must confront: change. Change in the land, in people, in the heavens above, and in forces beyond prediction. And as the wheel of time rolled over their world, something strange happened. Not a bloody collapse, but a quiet fading, as silent as desert sands burying the statues of gods that once ruled. At their peak, city-states like Ur, Uruk, Lagash, and Kish thrived not only economically and socially, but also entered what modern scholars call a golden age. Each city-state was not just a political hub, but also a center of art, religion, and knowledge. Sumerian kings proclaimed themselves kings of the four quarters, implying rule over the entire known world. They built grander temples, hosted lavish festivals lasting days, and carved their achievements into stone stelae, as if to leave an eternal mark on the earth. Monuments like the ziggurat of Ur and the irrigation systems of Nippur still amaze modern researchers with their precision and scale. Yet it was in this very prosperity that the seeds of decline were planted. The Sumerians relied heavily on the fertile delta of the Euphrates River to grow barley, dates, and vegetables that sustained entire cities. But centuries of continuous farming led to soil salinization. Their sophisticated irrigation systems became a double-edged sword. Water brought mineral salts from the river, which accumulated in the soil over time, eventually rendering the land infertile. Cuneiform records from around 2100 BCE show a drastic drop in crop yields. From 70-fold harvests per seed to less than 10, the land was exhausted, harvests failed, and people began to leave. It wasn't just nature that turned away. The human spirit began to fracture too. The Sumerian city-states constantly waged war over water, land, and religious influence. Each city had its own patron god, and loyalty to that deity often outweighed political alliances. Wars didn't just destroy infrastructure, they wounded morale. There are records of one city's god being conquered by another, such as a clay tablet from Lagash, describing how the god Ninurta led divine troops to defeat Enki's forces from Eridu. These were not just wars of men, but wars of gods. As the city-states fought endlessly, external powers began to take notice. From the northwest came a people called the Akkadians. They spoke a different language, but lived near the Sumerians. Under the leadership of a man named Sargon, the Akkadians did what no one had done before: unify all of Mesopotamia under a central authority for the first time in history. Sargon, calling himself King of Sumer and Akkad, was not just a conqueror. He was the first to establish the concept of an empire. His control extended beyond the military to administration, religion, and language. He allowed the Sumerians to keep their culture, but imposed Akkadian as the official language and elevated Akkadian gods to supremacy. From that point on, blending began. Texts were bilingual, temples combined architectural styles, and myths were rewritten to suit the new rulers. However, the Akkadian Empire lasted little more than a century before collapsing due to familiar reasons: drought, internal strife, and rebellion from former regions. In the chaos that followed, the Sumerians tried to rise once more. Under King Ur-Nammu of Ur, the Sumerians entered their final renaissance, a period modern historians call the Third Dynasty of Ur. Ur-Nammu issued the oldest complete law code ever discovered, predating even Hammurabi's Babylonian laws. He rebuilt the great ziggurat of Ur, reformed administration, and attempted to revive belief in the old Sumerian gods. But that last light flickered only briefly. Around 2004 BCE, Amorite nomads from the west invaded. Unlike the Akkadians, who shared cultural ties with the Sumerians, the Amorites were warrior tribes uninterested in literature or mythology. They captured Ur, overthrew the dynasty, and ended the Sumerian era. Yet the legacy of Sumer did not vanish completely. The Sumerian language ceased to be spoken, but continued to be taught in priestly schools, much like Latin in medieval Europe. Many Sumerian gods survived in their Akkadian, Babylonian, and later Assyrian forms. Cuneiform, though adapted, remained the dominant writing system for over 1,000 years. The old city-states fell into ruin, but beneath layers of sand, their clay tablets stayed intact, as if even time itself respected the greatness of what they had built. Thousands of years after the Sumerians disappeared from history, in the 19th century, European archaeologists excavating Mesopotamia uncovered hundreds of thousands of clay tablets inscribed with strange symbols no one could read. At first, they were thought to be written in ancient Babylonian, but after decades of research, scholars realized they were staring at an entirely different language, unrelated to Indo-European or Semitic tongues. It was Sumerian, the language of a civilization the world had forgotten. Deciphering the Sumerian language was an academic triumph that spanned decades and required the efforts of hundreds of researchers. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that the language was fully understood. Since then, a flood of knowledge has poured from the clay libraries: astronomical records, poetry, legal codes, letters, diaries, medical texts, accounting documents, and prayers, all resurfacing as if written only yesterday. After thousands of years, the Sumerians spoke again. Their decline was not an end, but a transformation. They did not vanish like the mythical Atlantis, nor were they forgotten like nameless tribes. They left their mark in time, in language, in social structures, in stories of gods, and in how we understand civilization itself. Today, though most people no longer speak their name, we still live in a world shaped by the Sumerians. When we check the time, using a system based on 60, when we write, continuing the legacy of cuneiform, when we speak of law, of human rights, of education, all of it traces back to them, the first civilization, the first dream, the first whisper of human intellect in the darkness of prehistory. And even if desert sands continue to bury the ruins of Ur and Uruk for centuries more, even if the rivers shift or vanish, that light, the light of the first Sumerians, will still flicker in humanity's memory like a spark that ignited all future civilization. When a civilization disappears from the map, people often believe it has died. But true death lies not in physical disappearance, but in forgetting. The Sumerian civilization, though it collapsed more than 4,000 years ago, has never fully left our world. Much of what they once thought, did, and dreamed still lingers with us, embedded deep within the structures of modern life, like an ancient foundation beneath the concrete of today's cities. We've spoken much about writing, mythology, laws, and temples, but there is something deeper, more silent, more enduring, the way the Sumerians envisioned the order of the universe. To them, the world was not random. Everything had a cause. Everything was governed by forces greater than humankind: time, fate, the cycles of nature. Nothing was natural in the casual sense. Everything was woven into an invisible web where every action and word carried sacred meaning. It was a world where all things were observed, recorded, and responded to, not by people, but by divine and cosmic principles. This concept of a structured cosmos is perhaps one of the greatest legacies of the Sumerians. It existed not only in their religion, but also in their science. The earliest thoughts on astronomy, mathematics, and numerology were born from efforts to find order in natural phenomena. Why does Venus disappear in this season? Why does the river rise after the full moon? These were not idle curiosities. They were questions of survival. Knowing when to sow crops, when to prepare for floods, when to offer sacrifices, this was life or death. And from survival, science was born. The Sumerians were the first to create a calendar based on the lunar cycle. They divided the year into 12 months, each with 29 or 30 days, almost identical to the lunar calendars still used in parts of the world today. They recorded weather patterns, earthquakes, eclipses, and constellations, not merely for observation, but to decode messages from the supernatural world. Some recovered astronomical tablets show astonishing precision, describing the movements of Jupiter and Saturn with near-perfect accuracy. This wasn't coincidence. It was intelligence, guided by faith. What set the Sumerians apart from earlier prehistoric cultures was their ability to preserve knowledge. They understood that human memory fades, but clay does not. So they carved their thoughts onto tablets, then fired them, creating hundreds of thousands of immortal books. The world's first libraries, like the one in the city of Nippur, were not for the masses, but for priests and scholars. Yet their existence shows a profound belief in accumulated knowledge, a conviction that what one person learns can outlive death if it is written down. The Sumerians didn't only record what they saw, they recorded what they thought. Many tablets contain verses, proverbs, and reflections on life. Some read like a father's advice to his son, others echo the philosophy of later Greek sages. One fragment found in reads, "Listen more than you speak. Remember that the tongue can kill faster than the sword." Another says, "The wise plant seeds in the dark. The fool drinks wine in the morning sun." These lines, though simple, show that the Sumerians were already pondering morality, living wisely, and the human condition. They also reflected on death, not just as a final destination, but as a state that could be prepared for. Though they didn't believe in reincarnation like the Egyptians, the Sumerians believed that what you did in life determined whether your soul would rest peacefully in the dark world. This realm, called Kur, was a misty, lightless place where souls lingered. But if buried properly, if your name was carved in stone, and if descendants remembered you, then your soul would not be forgotten. Death, in a way, was a return, a return to darkness, to origins. Among the thousands of clay tablets unearthed, one detail stands out. Many of them are letters. The Sumerians wrote to each other, between husbands and wives, parents and children, merchants and clients, kings and vassals. Some letters are scoldings, others tender longings. One wife wrote to her husband away on a trading journey. "You've been gone 4 moons. The children ask me every night, 'Where is father?' The rice is gone. The water is murky. Come home, or at least send peace to my heart." Such words can't be fabricated. They come from a real person with real fears over 4,000 years ago. And they make the Sumerians not an archaeological term, but human, like you and me. It is in these quiet details that the Sumerians left a legacy more profound than any temple or conquest: humanity. They didn't just record battles, they recorded complaints, affection, doubt, and dreams. In many prayer texts, the name of a god is absent. It is simply a human speaking to something unseen. "Please do not forget me." This is no longer religion. It is the fear of vanishing, of meaninglessness, and the yearning to be remembered, even as a name etched crookedly in clay. Today, as we walk on asphalt roads, check digital clocks, and type on modern keyboards, few stop to think that these things once existed only as ideas in the mind of someone living in Uruk over 5,000 years ago. But if we look closely, patiently, we see the layers underneath. The way we organize society, record data, make laws, build homes, worship, educate children, all stretch back to a single origin: Sumer. Their decline was real, but never complete. They may no longer exist politically, but they live on in the very structure of human thought. Every time we divide a day into 24 hours, every time we write something down, whether with pen or keyboard, we carry them forward. And that is the Sumerians' final victory. They became an immortal part of us. They need no gods in the sky, no temples in the sand, no names sung each year. It is enough that each of us, even unconsciously, continues what they once thought, once wrote, once dreamed. In that way, they are still here. So now you and I have walked together through the astonishing journey of the first civilization, the place where humans first wrote, first dreamed, first built their own world. Though they vanished millennia ago, the Sumerians still live quietly in the bloodstream of human intelligence. They were the beginning, and perhaps the place to return to when we seek to understand ourselves. Thank you for joining me. See you in the next video, where another lost civilization awaits discovery.